You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 16th of February 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, Israel aims to declare parts of the West Bank state property. We'll hear just how much this changes realities on the ground and also how the Palestinians are moving ahead with a constitution. After that, sticking with the Middle East.
In general, as European Union, we are very clear. We cannot join now, but we will be supportive. And we are ready to support this process. That is a process, obviously, where President Trump played a fundamental role.
Luigi Di Maio is the EU's special representative for the Gulf region. He spoke with Monocle's Andrew Muller in Munich about Trump's Board of Peace, among other things. We'll also hear from Brazil, which is in carnival celebrations this weekend, but is also celebrating its first ever gold medal in the Winter Olympics. And sticking with the Olympics.
For the first time, we had San Siro during the opening ceremony and 3 other locations. First time that all the athletes could participate in the opening ceremony. Never happens in Winter Games.
We hear from Christophe Duby, the man behind the Olympic Games. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. A very happy Monday to all of our listeners. Hope you had a great weekend and glad to have you with us for the start of another week. We'll start the show today in the Middle East, where Israel's efforts to establish new facts on the ground in the West Bank has been taken up another notch. For the first time since 1967, Israel's government is launching a process that could see parts of the West Bank declared state property, allowing Israeli settlers to formally purchase the land. The Palestinian presidency has called it a de facto annexation. Well, joining me now from Abu Dhabi is Nada Al-Tahir, senior foreign reporter at The National. Nada, thanks very much for coming back on the show. It has been a week or so of moves by Israel to change realities on the ground in the West Bank. Where does this step sort of rank in that?
Hi, Chris. This step has accelerated an already ongoing issue that's been taking place for years now. It seems as if stopping short of declaring it a full-blown annexation is going to make this move sound better when it doesn't, actually, because it's the changing of the reality on the ground, as you just mentioned. We're basically cutting off vital parts of Palestine from each other. And that not only obviously completely disrupts a normal day-to-day life, whether it's going to school or going to work or getting access to your family, but also allows for settlers and settler violence to continue to propagate as settlers go on unpunished. Israel likes to say that these settlers are a small minority, that they do not represent the majority of the population, but then when the settlers are being protected by the Israeli army and when their actions go unpenalized largely and they face no legal consequences for their actions, they're only being emboldened. And then when the state takes measures like this that only emboldens further and further and oppresses Palestinians further and further, they're only saying, keep going. And this move has been obviously widely condemned, but it doesn't seem that we're any closer to any real action, even though many states across the world have said that the annexation of the West Bank is a red line. But are we seeing any measures being taken in order to stop Israel from crossing that red line, which it had repeatedly crossed? I don't think so.
Well, Nada, to stick with exactly what's happening here and sort of how this is crossing the red line, as I understand this at least, Israel is claiming or saying it will declare the land in the West Bank state property if Palestinians fail to prove ownership. But I'm curious from your perspective how you read that, what that means, because of course, what is the bar for proving ownership, especially in the reality that we're currently in? How are Palestinians expected to prove their ownership of the land?
There are a bunch of different things here. A lot of Palestinians who fled in 1948 were forced to flee in 1948 during the Nakba still carry the keys to their homes, as is widely known, and that is proof of ownership. But obviously, when another and foreign alien family moves into a family home that once belonged to Palestinians, they will destroy anything and everything that proves ownership. And when we talk about, allowing settlers to buy purchase land or purchase homes, we're really talking about the coercion into purchase. We're really talking about laws that are not really enforced, but more so there for decoration, if you want to say, because they're not really there to be enforced. They're not there to be observed. They're only there to say that, hey, we're doing our best. We're trying to do things by the book, even though all of this is in violation of international law, and all of this is annexation, all of this is occupation. But there really isn't a way for Palestinians who have been coerced and forced to leave and flee their homes to prove ownership, when the very state that is occupying them and oppressing them is also depriving them of their rights, but government rights, civil rights, and legal rights.
Well, Nada, as well, if you, as you say, this is a red line that's being crossed here. We've touched on that the Palestinian presidency is certainly calling this a de facto annexation, as you've outlined as well. But what are the reactions beyond that? You talked about international condemnation, but I'm curious, particularly in the Gulf where you are and sort of in the region, what sort of reactions are you hearing there? Is any action going to be taken against this?
We're not quite sure what is happening behind closed doors. Obviously, we only see the conversations that are taking place on the international stage, and the consensus is that this is violation of international law. Israel has been in violation of international law for decades. It accelerated its violation of international law during its bombardment of Gaza, which is still ongoing, by the way. The ceasefire in Gaza has not been observed. There has no been ceasing of any fire. So a lot of red lines, a lot of violations have been taking place, but what is actually being done is yet to be seen. Palestine is more recognized at the UN General Assembly now as a state, and it is, according to the UN, a state. And the Palestinian presidency is, for the first time, taking concrete measures to bring Palestine closer to statehood by putting out a draft version of the constitution, by showing that it's taking reform measures under international pressure, of course, and local pressure. But the annexation of the West Bank deters all of that. It puts a wrench in all these plans. And then the Palestinian Authority is also being blamed for not taking further concrete steps, but then it can't really when it's being suppressed at the same time. So statehood is up in the air. International law is more of a suggestion rather than something that is being observed, and consequences are unknown.
Well, Nada, just finally, because you did mention the Constitution within that, I'd like you to talk a little more about that. What's actually happening with this draft Constitution put forward by the Palestinians? Is going to be a sort of 60-day consultation period, I understand now. But as you say, this is happening amid a very complex situation.
So Palestine had basic law. Basic law is a step under constitution, not a proper constitution. And this is an interim constitution for the period that is before statehood, that is preceding statehood. And this interim draft constitution is now going to be made public for people to vote on as a sort of referendum, give their feedback. I've already heard a lot of criticism, but regardless, you cannot please everybody. It's certainly being considered, even by the critics, as a step in the right direction. But the right direction towards what? Because Israel has declared repeatedly that it will not allow a Palestinian state to come into fruition. Even if it's internationally recognized as a state, it's not being practically implemented on the ground. So the Constitution itself is definitely a step in the right direction. It covers all the usual things that you would imagine a constitution would. But in the Constitution, Palestine is not a state. And for it to become a state, the Palestinian Authority would have to change into a proper government, right? And converge from an authority into a government. So there are many steps that need to be taken, but as long as Israel practices these violations, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza, or certainly on Palestinians living under occupation by emboldening the settlers, there's only so many steps that we can take before making any tangible progress, because everything is just being blocked from every direction.
Nada Al-Tahir, senior foreign reporter at The National, speaking to us from Abu Dhabi. Thank you very much. And now here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Germany's foreign minister says France is not spending enough on defence. Johann Wadephul says Paris must match its words on European strength with action. He accused France of not doing enough to meet NATO's spending goal, as Germany poured hundreds of billions of euros into rearmament. Multiple people are injured after a train derailed in Switzerland following an avalanche near the Swiss Alps. The crash took place in the canton of Valais at about 7 in the morning local time. Emergency services have evacuated dozens of people and around 80 passengers were on board. And the world's largest annual migration is now underway as millions across Asia celebrate the Lunar New Year. Officials expect a record 9.5 billion trips during the holiday travel rush across China. The government hopes the longer break will boost spending and lift the economy. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. Now we'll stick with the Middle East on Monocle Radio, because while the seismic shift in the transatlantic relationship and the war in Ukraine dominated much of this year's Munich Security Conference, securing peace in Gaza also loomed large on the agenda. Monocle's foreign desk team were on the ground in the Bavarian capital and spoke with Luigi Di Maio, the European Union's special representative for the Gulf region. Andrew Muller began by asking him just what his role has entailed in recent months.
We have to consider that until 2022, the European Union didn't have a structured strategy for strategic partnership with the GCC countries. We approved that in May 2022. Since there, we are implementing a huge number of initiatives on trade, economy in general, connectivity, new technologies, energy, people to people, and so on. I would say the peak of the new era, the relations with the GCC, was in October 2024 when we had the summit of the leaders in Brussels. Going at the end of the story, so the most recent weeks and months, it's clear that now we are in a different stage where most of the initiatives that we launched now are concretizing. We have, for instance, a free trade agreement under concrete negotiation with United Arab Emirates, EU, UAE. We launched a new tool of strategic partnership agreement negotiation, a tailor-made strategic partnership with each one of the GCC countries. We offered them a strategic partnership agreement in order to shape our partnership about everything, not only energy and technologies, but even if agreed defense, security, and even link it to the people-to-people, university, schools, and so on. So we are shaping concretely what our leaders put in written in October 2024.
I mean, does Europe feel all that respected in the Gulf these days? Is there any worry that you're getting frozen out, for example, of discussions over Gaza, that this is all going to get hoovered up by Donald Trump's Board of Peace?
The Gulf obviously is a very important partner even on Gaza, and I have to say that the cooperation between the US, Qatar, Egypt in the negotiation for a ceasefire was fundamental, but US was always in coordination with us as allies, as the Gulf partners like Qatar or Egypt, obviously not a Gulf country. They were in coordination with the rest of the partners in the Middle East. We all together reached the incredible, I would say, and finally, probably too late, result of the ceasefire. But now this Board of Peace, I know that there are many criticisms about this plan. And probably it's not a perfect plan, but it's the only one that can work because it's able to have around the table all the main actors state actors and no state actors sometimes, not in the board of peace, of course, but in these negotiations for the ceasefire, for disarming Hamas, and for going ahead in the direction of a prosperous Gaza and, I would say, even West Bank, because we have not to decouple the two areas. Let's see, but many member states of Europe were invited in the Board of Peace. We were not excluded. We know that there were some legal issues that didn't allow our member states to join directly the Board of Peace, but for instance now is news of last hours that one member state announced that will be an observer in the Board of Peace. In general, as European Union, we are very clear. We cannot join now, but we will be supportive, and we are ready to support this process. That is a process, obviously, where President Trump played a fundamental role, but where the protagonism of many other countries was fundamental.
But does the EU really actually want a role in Gaza, though? Because involvement in the Middle East from outside powers does tend to be fairly difficult and thankless.
We play a role in Gaza and in Palestine since many years. We are the most important donor of the Palestinian Authority since many years, and the most important, the largest donor of UNRWA in Gaza. And I'm sure that with all our support to the Palestinian Authority, we will create a process that will pave the way for a viable Palestinian institution.
Does the fact of that history of support for the Palestinian Authority and for UNRWA, which you're obviously completely correct about, but those organizations are not, I think it's fair to say, highly regarded by the people who are driving the process now. Is that not likely to be held against the EU?
That is the only viable or possibly viable institution that we have. Even the Board of Peace, the Executive Board, the Technical Committee, they are considered by the plan as temporary institutions for implementing the plan for the peace in Gaza. But then at a certain point, I suppose, that everything has to be covered by an institution. And the Palestinian Authority is the only institution that we have at this stage. And in any case, is even the institution that was the result of the Oslo Agreement. Let's remember even that. After the Oslo Agreement, we created this kind of institution that was able to manage West Bank and part of the services in Gaza, of the utilities in Gaza, during all this time.
Luigi Di Maio there, the EU's special representative for the Gulf region, speaking with Monocle's Andrew Muller. You can tune in to this week's Foreign Desk, premiering on Saturday at midday London time, for more of our conversations with leaders at this year's Munich Security Conference. This is The Briefing. You are back with The Briefing, and it's been a big weekend for Brazil, with Carnival back home and the first ever Winter Olympic gold medal, or any medal for that matter, in Milan. And here to tell us all about it, of course, is our senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Fernando, I will get to the congratulations later, but I'll give you a first congratulations. How does it feel?
It feels very nice. It was emotional. I think I had tears, actually. Somebody was recording, my partner was recording myself after the gold, and I was like, wow, there was a sense of disbelief. And not just me, but even Brazilian commentators, because Chris, this is historic. It's not only the first gold medal of Brazil, it's our first ever Winter Olympic medal, the first ever Winter Olympic medal for Latin America. It's only the third country in the Southern Hemisphere to ever get an Winter Olympic medal. I think so far it's just Australia, New Zealand, and now Brazil. So it is quite a momentous time for Brazil in that case.
Well, introduce at this point for us Lucas Pinheiro Brathen. He is the winner, the gold medal winner in the giant slalom in the skiing. Tell us about him and how he's being celebrated in Brazil right now.
What I love about Lucas, and just for context, his mother is Brazilian, his father is Norwegian, and he used to play for the Norwegian delegation. But then I think when he was 23 years old, which was about 2 years ago, he decided to quit his career. I think there was some kind of perhaps some issues with the delegation. Maybe he was feeling a little bit too constricted, And then, he always had a strong connection with Brazil. So it's not just a single fact, we're hiring this athlete from a different country. His mother is Brazilian. He speaks Portuguese. He always spends his holidays there.
He dances.
He dances the samba. I mean, he's charismatic, and I think maybe that's why he felt so much at home, and there was a whole country behind him. Of course, Brazil does not have a strong tradition in the Winter Olympics, but I think even when he was playing for Norway, I think it was even controversial in Norway. He always had a Brazilian flag somewhere on his outfit, perhaps on his neck, a little scarf here and there. So the connection was always there. And then it appeared this opportunity. I think, I believe he used to train a lot in Austria because Red Bull is one of his sponsors. So even Austria, helped him a little bit in his career. But I think the love and the passion of Brazilians, I genuinely think there was a good push for Lucas because it was big news. It was on the front page of all our Sunday newspapers. And listen, Chris, we're doing carnival, so people are dancing, but they're still watching the Winter Olympics because of Lucas.
Absolutely, because of Lucas. And thank you for that Austria mention. I've been feeling quite down for the Austrians in the skiing as an Austrian myself, not doing so well. I was just happy you beat the Swiss, frankly, in that race because there was going to be a top 3 of Switzerland. And then Lucas Pinot-Bachen came in and stole the gold. So great news on that front. Let's move on a little to Carnival, though, as you mentioned it, Fernando, because there has been, and we touched on this on Thursday during the Global Countdown, there's been some controversy this year.
There's always controversies at carnivals, some interesting risque outfits and much more. But this time...
Well, that's a different type of
controversy.
The risque, this is the political side.
Yeah, also tiny bit risque, but basically, of course, as you know, the samba schools in Rio and São Paulo, each one of them, they choose a different theme every year, and this one from Niterói, they decided, to celebrate the life of Lula, Brazil's president. And that's fair enough. It was their choice. It wasn't Lula that asked them to do this. And Lula was indeed at the audience, watching the celebration of his life with a few other ministers. But the thing is, we do have strict laws that we are in an electoral year. And so some people, nothing has been decided, nothing's going to court, but some people say, this is actually not okay,
Well, there have been some lawsuits, to clarify. I understood. Some are trying to sue the schools, but whether it goes anywhere, we don't know.
Exactly. Whether it goes anywhere, we don't know. And it would be a shame as well for Lula himself. He's going for re-election again, potentially later this year. Listen, I don't think it's going to be the biggest story here, but he does have to be careful. But it was a beautiful celebration. There was a massive statue of Lula. Apparently, it was bigger than the pyramids in Giza. I don't know. I've been reading far too many articles on that, but it was beautiful. It was celebratory, but people are saying, is this fair? To have already a candidate, should we do another one?
It's a bit of a political campaign. That would be the argument, obviously.
And it was not satire.
Free campaigning. Well, I was going to ask you about that. Tell us what you usually get in Brazil, because it's not as if politics is not ever part of Carnival, but it's more satire, which is similar to Germany, Portugal, our Carlota Rebelo was mentioning as well. Political satire is common, but not such maybe direct, a little more political messaging.
Yes, we are not perhaps as directly political as perhaps the German Carnival or maybe the Portuguese, but there are always satire. And one thing about Brazilian Carnival, even in the costumes, it always reflects what's happening in the world as well. So, I remember there was a year when Jair Bolsonaro went to jail, some people were dressed up as him, as a prisoner or something like that. So there is the political connotation there. It's undeniably so, but always with a cheeky smile on your face.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. Finally, on today's show, to Monocle in Milan, where earlier on today's edition of our Olympic programming, Andrew Muller was joined by Christophe Duby, the Olympic Games Executive Director. He began by asking what a day of the Olympics is like for that man behind the Games.
Can I say that 13 days in, it's pretty cool.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
You
would have asked me.
You're tempting fate here.
No. But you would have told me 15 days ago that it would be so. It was impossible.
Mm-hmm.
There is a faculty here in this country to do magic at the very last minute, that is unprecedented. So I'm is it a radio or a press conference 3 days prior to the start of the games, and I'm asked about the famous Santa Giulia. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's going to be finished. Just and maybe. And guess what? Santa Giulia looks fantastic. So 13 days in, it's a great feeling. Everything works well, and we're watching slalom in Bormio. It's snowing, it's winter conditions, it's perfect.
When the games is actually on, do you actually get to go to any of it, or do you just watch all the highlights later?
Yeah. The latter. I'd love to say I'm going everywhere. No, in a former life, I have been a sport director, and here it was the duty to go and understand each and every of the events and each and every rule. Not the case anymore. I've got to make sure that the whole system works, and it better from the office where we have a command center, and here you have all the information, you can address issue. And by the way, if I go to a venue, I feel bad. I always feel that I shouldn't be there, and something will happen, and I will not be on my phone. So I try to watch like this and really enjoy it. It's a different experience, but worthwhile when it works.
Thinking about your phone, which I'm sure is extremely hot to the touch while an Olympic Games is on, genuinely, what kind of calls do you get? If somebody phones you while the games are on, what are they trying to tell you? What problem are you going to be asked to solve?
You know what? From the very mundane to bigger issues, especially prior to the games, it was helping to find the last people that could help fixing some of the issues in Santa Giulia, like airflow. Mm-hmm. Right? Do we have an expert that can address the airflow situation? And yes, we had one. Flying from Canada is called Art Sutherland, and without him, it wouldn't be the same. The person that is addressing airflow. And at the same time, that very same day, I could have had someone from the government calling me for a last bit of agreement where they need the IOC to ratify, and that would be a day prior to the games. In the games would be more or less the same, except that since we don't have any major issue here, tends to be people wanting to share satisfaction. Here we have John Scowen from Deloitte. We just had a casual talk and just confirming this. So these are the talks that I love to have at that point in time.
Obviously, your big priority is making sure the rest of these games proceed smoothly. But thinking beyond that, what do you envisage in terms of legacy that these games will leave to Milan? Because this is something that always gets talked about a lot in the process when cities are bidding, as in it won't just be the 2 weeks the games are on. What will we be left with?
Behind the obvious, the tech, the job creation, the economic impact, I think these games leave two things which are enormous for me. One is, for the first time, we had San Siro during the opening ceremony and 3 other locations. First time that all the athletes could participate in the opening ceremony. Never happens in Winter Games. You have those playing on ice, they can always be in the ceremony. Those racing on snow, never. First time we have all athletes in the ceremony. It seems very easy, it's very complex to realize. First thing. Second is, we're watching here Bormio. On the other side of the Foscagno Pass is Livigno. And to the west of the mountain range is Cortina. And every one of these locations, they have the local pride, the local culture, the music, the food, the clothing, everything is different. And they're so proud. One pass away, don't talk about the recipe of pasta in Bormio that you had the night before in Livigno. That won't work. And this localization, the ultra capillarity of the games taking place in a given culture, a very local culture, is what is a big change from here compared to any previous edition. And it's so rich that, it's simple, but it's innovation.
Was this something that was talked about before the games in terms of how it would present itself? Because obviously these games are being held in Italy, which is a country that everybody thinks they have some idea of. And it's usually a pretty positive idea because why wouldn't it be? It's one of the best countries on earth to visit. But were you talking about or thinking about, are there local particularities, even peculiarities that we can make a part of this?
We did, and it was a very conscious decision to say those games should not be the same in Cortina and in Livigno. Different population. You don't put curling in Livigno. Why? Because Cortina is the queen of the Dolomites. This is where everyone from Rome to Firenze are coming in Cortina. But you better have some economic means while you're going to Livigno with the cool kids, and it's not exactly the same experience. Not at all the same experience, actually. And when you go there, it's for freestyle. It's a different atmosphere in town, in the main street. Livigno and Cortina are different, and we have to respect this and not come with the games and say it has to be the same experience, has to be the same food, same music, same everything. Totally different, and it works.
You mentioned the curling, about which I do have to ask. It has got a bit tasty, especially between Sweden and Canada. Is this something you have to get involved with at all?
No. No, not at all. And I heard about it yesterday from a journalist, actually, Graham. He comes to see me and said, have you heard about the curling? And I'm like, this is more for the sports people. I understand that there is an issue here. I saw a video of the Canadians and the Swedes having an argument, but no, I'm not involved anymore in these kinds of situation. But we have an excellent sport director that is looking into the matter.
Christophe Duby, Olympic Games Executive Director, speaking with Andrew Muller. Monocle in Milan is every day this week, still live on Monocle Radio at 9 a.m. London, 10 a.m. Milan time, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson, and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.